Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Australian Archaeological Institute at Athens. I'm Stavros Paspalasi, Acting Director, and it is indeed a pleasure to welcome you here today. And it's even a greater pleasure to welcome and introduce to you our speaker this evening, Dr. Gina Salapata, who, as you would have read, is a senior lecturer at Massey University, New Zealand. Dr. Salapata studied originally here at the University of Athens and then took her graduate degrees at the University of Pennsylvania. She's probably best known for her monograph, Heroic Offerings, the terracotta plaques from the Spartan sanctuary of Agamemnon and Cassandra, which was published a few years ago. And her research is focused primarily on topics related to the Laconia, Messenia region on the one hand, and on ancient Greek religion and religious practices on the other. Though Adonis has also found his place within her research interest area. And it is to Adonis that Dr. Salapata will draw our attention this evening in her lecture, Adonis and His Lady Loves in South Italian Art. And so without any further ado, I'll ask for a speaker to come forward. Gina.
Thank you, Stavros. Actually, it's interesting because quite a few years ago I spoke again here at the Australian Institute about Adonis again on another topic, so I'm not repeating, but it's kind of like my love for Adonis, which is a bit of a pun, and it's long, it's long held. So, in Greek mythology, the exceptional beauty of Adonis, I'll call him in his Greek name, not Adonis, because it sounds funny in Greek, because Adonis is the first name, so Adonis. His exceptional beauty inspired a passionate love in two powerful goddesses, Aphrodite and Persephone. Despite variations in ancient sources, this myth is certainly of Eastern origins. This is shown both from his name, deriving from the Semitic divine title Adon, meaning Lord, and from his parentage. Adonis was born from the incestuous union of Smyrna or Mira and her father, who is reported either as Thias, king of Assyria, or Kiniras, king of Cyprus, or Phoenix, the eponymous of the Phoenicians, but all of them are Orientals from the East. The unnatural love of the daughter was caused by the wrath of Aphrodite because the girl was not interested in her charms. Persecuted by her furious father, whom she had tricked to sleep with her, Mira was eventually transformed into the eponymous myrrh tree. The valuable aromatic resinous sap of this tree, perhaps representing her tears, was burned as incense or was used to make perfumed oil. Out of this perfumed tree came Adonis, yes. Aphrodite was smitten by the infant Adonis and hid him in a casket which she entrusted for safekeeping to Persephone, queen of the underworld. But Persephone herself, charmed by the beauty of the boy, refused to return him to Aphrodite. According to one tradition, Zeus interceded in the squabble between the two foster mothers and decreed that Adonis should spend a third of the year with the celestial Aphrodite, a third with the underworld Persephone, and a third wherever he wished. Adonis readily chose to live his share of the year again with his beloved Aphrodite. Aphrodite won. Another tradition has Zeus appointing the muse Calliope as a judge, with Calliope deciding each goddess should possess him for half of the year. The main themes in Adonis's myth are his love affair with Aphrodite and his premature death in the prime of youth, which brought him to the realm of Persephone. Later, literary sources say that Adonis died a violent death, mortally wounded by a boar while hunting. The mythical background and cult practices associated with Adonis are well attested in the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. The Mesopotamian god Dumuzi in Sumerian or Tammuz in Akkadian was consort of the goddess of love, Inanna or Ishtar, according to the culture. And he spent half of the year with her and the other half with the queen of the underworld, the eastern queen of the underworld, Ereshkigal. After being killed by a boar, he was ritually lamented by women every summer. So you can see the similarities in the story. This worship later spread westward to Syro-Palestine and had already reached Greece by the Archaic period. Adonis is mentioned in Sappho's poems. The god's Semitic divine title, Adon, Lord, transformed into the name of the Greek mythological figure Adonis. The youth lost the divine status he enjoyed in the East and was demoted to a demigod of ambiguous status, which resembled that of a hero, but he was never worshipped with temples and cults. It's quite strange, the status of Adonis, in fact. From Greece, the Hellenized myth and cult spread westwards into Etruscan and Greek colonial territories where they were adapted to local tastes and requirements. Adonis was a fashionable theme in theatre from the late 5th century onwards, as shown by the attested titles for 2 tragedies, one from Western Greece by Dionysius I, tyrant of Syracuse, who wrote it in the 4th century, and by several comedies entitled Adonis, or at least referring to him. He was also a popular subject in late 5th and early 4th century Attic and South Italian vase painting, especially of the Apulian region. Several scenes imbued with erotic overtones focus on Aphrodite and Adonis as lovers, placed in an outdoor setting and involved in their amorous embrace and surrounded by females. For example, here we see a late 5th century Attic Hydria by the Midias painter, found in a grave at Populonia in the Etruscan territory, which depicts the labeled Adonis. There is a label identifying him here as Adonis. He has abandoned his lyre on the ground and he's leaning back between Aphrodite's knees in erotic ecstasy as he receives her embrace. The couple are surrounded by Eros figures, Erotes, and female personifications of the goddess's entourage. Adonis here is literally spellbound, as indicated by 2 implements of erotic magic. The desire-inducing inks, will, or yinks, I don't know how it's pronounced exactly in English, held by Eros. You can't see it very well, but it's here between his hands, but I'll show you a drawing showing how they were using it. And by the inks or wry-necked bird that is held by this woman just across on her hand, which in Greek, I searched to find the Greek name, is called Therkopouli or Stravolenis. Yeah, it has a peculiar feature. He can turn, he or she, I don't know, the word, it, can turn the neck all the way. And yeah, it's a very peculiar kind of, you can see in this picture that is turning the head. And it was used, I can tell you a little more if you want later on, from ancient times in erotic magic. Scenes like this one highlight the beauty of Adonis, which not even Aphrodite could resist, and accentuate the love they shared. Similar is a unified scene decorating a unique pair of South Italian terracotta altars in the J. Paul Getty Museum in Malibu, which were most likely used to burn incense. The embracing couple of Aphrodite and Adonis, here, Adonis, Aphrodite, is quite effeminate, as you can see. He is quite a, a beautiful but also effeminate as well. So the couple of the 2 lovers are surrounded by 5 women, 4 of which are making music and dance. I have argued in an article some years ago that all women are attendants of the goddess, most likely nymphs, who play the role in the myth of Adonis because they help the birth of Adonis out of the tree. The seated woman here is a bit more problematic. She is seated on a chest, and I argue that she has carried the bridal casket for this union, which is presented as a sort of marriage. But this happy union is not destined to last, and her inability to do anything to avoid the tragic end is shown through her posture, which is quite pensive and kind of sad. She's clasping her knee with both hands, kind of like a visual expression of her hands are tied. She cannot change the future, and the future of this union will not last because we know that he's going to die. He's going to pass on to Persephone. The meaning of the casket itself, however, may also allude to the casket in which Aphrodite hid Adonis before entrusting him to Persephone, so it could have multiple meanings. Other vases show the return of Adonis from the underworld, commonly shown in the form of a chariot ride of the lovers, as on the neck of this Apulian volute crater, and on a fragment in a private collection with an inscribed Adonis. Here's his name, and here's Aphrodite, and they are on a chariot. So it's the kind of the union, the return of the Adonis from the underworld into the hands of Aphrodite. An Apulian Lebis Gamikos in Sydney shows in a unique way the return of Adonis in the form of an anodos, a rise from the underworld. Literally, he rises because that's the ground line, and he's coming out of the earth, the underworld, into the waiting hands of Aphrodite. She holds a myrtle branch, which is one of her attributes. Another anodos may be represented on the neck of this volute crater, and here is this figure. Professor Kambitoglu has argued that this is Adonis. We don't have a label, but because he's shown among flowers, he's represented as if he's rising out of the underworld. Also, he has suggested that this, this depiction, which is not so clear, but shows a youth. This is his face, rising out of this very luxuriant calyx of flower into the hands of Aphrodite, and they are kissing here, is another of these kind of anodos rise of Adonis from the underworld. The dispute between the goddesses is even more popular with the vase painters, and is shown in either a more restrained or a livelier manner. A volute crater in Malibu by the Meleager painter, which was made in Athens, depicts a youth lying on a couch furnished with elaborate tapestries and cushions. We're missing his head, but we can see that he raises both hands to tie a fillet around his long, beautiful curly hair, while Eros offers him some fruit on a dish. The youth, almost certainly Adonis, is flanked by two groups of 3 women. The 2 seated women, identically dressed, bejeweled, and seated on similar seats, have been persuasively identified as Aphrodite on the left and Persephone on the right, with their corresponding attendants. Adonis appears again with the label in the main scene of another Apulian vase in Naples, and this scene is probably influenced by the tragedy Dionysius from Syracuse wrote. Here, just a detail, sorry. We see the middle part, we see again the youth reclining, and with hands brought to his head, which is again adorned with a headband. Some scholars believe that he's shown dying there, but I have argued that the usual interpretation of that he's dying is not correct. Rather than suggesting his failing strength and imminent death, his pose and gesture, putting his hand above his head, putting his hands above his head, assume an erotic meaning, indicating openness, willingness, and readiness for love. We know that from other depictions of other people reclining in a symposium, for example, having this kind of putting their relaxed and putting their hands on the head. At the head of Adonis's bed stand two females, and they are either his mother Mira and a nurse who seems to have featured in Dionysus' tragedy, or Aphrodite and Persephone. We're not sure, that there are no labels for the others. In the scene above, on the neck of the same vase, we have Aphrodite with Eros on the right, and Persephone on the left, wearing a Polos headdress and holding a torch, appealing to Zeus. The emotional entreaty of Aphrodite, kneeling at Zeus's feet, contrasts with the aloofness of Persephone, who may have already made her case and is simply waiting for the decision. Adonis must be the small figure over here, holding on to the staff of Zeus, maybe appearing in the form of a kind of eidolon, or kind of soul, or kind of not very important, highlighting as shrunken kind of appearance in between two worlds, I guess. A very emotional Aphrodite also appears on an Etruscan mirror. Etruscans were influenced by Greek art. And this is another scene of arbitration between Zeus, he's labeled there, and Aphrodite on the left, who is crying. We can see her, weeping, very, emotional, and Persephone again labeled on the right. Where is Adonis? He must be in that casket. We assume he's in the casket, hidden there, and this forms the bond of contention between the two goddesses. I mean, they are arguing for him in front of Zeus. The petition of Zeus over Adonis is also shown on another South Italian vase in New York. And here we have a flying Eros accompanying each of the goddesses. We have on the left, we have one of them is Persephone, and Aphrodite on the right, and they're again appealing to Zeus. The funerary context is clear both by the shape of the vessel, because this shape, the Lutrophoros, it was a typical funerary vase, and because the lower register, you can see there on the left, contains a grave monument, and there are youths and young women bringing offerings to a grave monument. So the whole thing has funeral connotations in general, including the myth of Adonis. It has been suggested that the enthroned man is actually a throned god, is actually Hades, not Zeus, in which case the scene would be located in the underworld. If so, a tradition provided by some later authors that Aphrodite herself descended into the underworld to fetch Adonis, thus bringing about the division of Adonis's time, may already have been known to South Italian artists. So even though the references to this tradition come from later Christian sources, if this is indeed in the underworld, the Italian artists knew that tradition. But other similar scenes show the seated god holding a thunderbolt, which identify him as Zeus. So it's assumed that most likely is Zeus and not Hades. The second version of the arbitration, with the muse Calliope adjudicating the fate of Adonis, is the most likely interpretation of a scene on another vase in California. Here we have Adonis, again sitting on a couch, holding kithara, a musical instrument, and flanked by two females who appear to be talking or negotiating. They're doing this gesture with fingers pointing, which we don't know exactly what it is, but definitely they are talking to each other. And in other scenes also, it's communication. We don't know exactly, but if you do know what exactly it means, it would be nice to hear. And some scholars have identified the woman on the left with Calliope, the muse, who is kind of like talking to Persephone on the right. Persephone is identified by the torch with a cross that is one of her attributes that she's holding, she's leaning her left hand on, and the headdress that she wears. Consequently, we have again another woman sitting on the left with a fan, and she wears a diadem, and she must be Aphrodite. So it's probably here that Calliope is making the argument on behalf maybe of Aphrodite, or she's communicating with Persephone. Because the enthroned woman must be quite important. We cannot assume the standing woman is Aphrodite. Who would be the other one sitting? So that's why they assume it's Calliope. The rivalry is embodied in the agitated goose that we can see there, who is aggressively heading for Persephone. Adonis himself is framed by two trees, as you can see. There is a myrtle on the left, which kind of corresponds with Persephone because it's the sacred to Persephone, the myrtle tree. And on the right is most likely a pomegranate tree, which fits, of course, with Persephone because the pomegranate played a significant role in the fate of Persephone. I'm sure you know that Persephone got stuck in the underworld because she tasted a pomegranate seed. So it's kind of two different trees, likely representing the two different goddesses. The conflict between Aphrodite and Persephone, but with a hint that the love goddess is winning, is implied in some depictions where both goddesses are present along with Adonis. Here, for example, we may, it's not sure, but we may have Adonis here, drawn to Aphrodite by the power of Eros and the wry-necked bird, which is supersized here, maybe very important. So again, we have kind of Aphrodite and Adonis close together, flanked by these powerful, erotic elements, while wrapped up Persephone is just sitting there waiting, cannot do anything else but watch. So the engagement of Adonis and Aphrodite may hint that she's going to win him, at least in this case. In addition to emphasizing Adonis's capacity to mitigate the absolute opposition between life and death, such scenes allude to the power of love over death. A scene on a Napoleon dish in Naples fits within this iconographic tradition and will be my focus for the rest of this presentation. I reinterpret it as representing Adonis in the company of both Aphrodite and Persephone. The dish is of a characteristic Apollyon shape with a short foot and knobs alongside the handles. It is dated to the late 4th century and attributed to the white Sakos painter, just a conventional name, and specifically the chariot group, as it is again conventionally known. It's recomposed from several fragments, but is not repainted. And it is one of the largest specimens of these type of dishes with a diameter of over 70 centimeters, so it's quite huge. Such dishes in bronze, but probably also in terracotta, were often used for ceremonial washing, for example in a bridal or funerary context. The outside, as you can see on the right, is black, plain, while the tondo on the interior, here's a larger view, is divided into two sections by an ornamental band of tendrils and flowers that contain a winged bust, most likely of Eros, effeminate Eros. In the narrow excerpt at the bottom, there is a row of rosettes with a head, perhaps female, in the center. The entire composition is surrounded by a band decorated with different patterns, including grapevines and tendrils, interrupted by two flying arrows figures above and below. The top section of the tondo shows an Amazon driving a quadriga to the left. She wears a special hat that comes from the Phrygia, the area in Asia Minor, and carries a shield and a battle axe. Flying above the horses is an Eros, while a youthful male figure with small white horns, animal skin and winged shoes, holding a bucket and a stick, leads the way at the front. This peculiar figure has been identified as Pan, or as a Pan-like figure substituted for Hermes, for whom the winged shoes are more appropriate. But he's problematic. I mean, we don't really know what's going on there. I'm not so much interested in this scene. I'm more interested in the scene below, in the lower section, which was originally described as, quote, Eros, woman with raised foot, seated youth with kithara, woman with torch, Eros, unquote. And it was later specified by Alexander Kambitoglu as Adonis in the underworld in the close company of Persephone. Kambitoglu remarked that this is a rarely depicted scene in contrast to those depicting Adonis in the intimate company of Aphrodite alone, or to those focusing on the judgment. Here I argue instead that this is yet another scene representing Adonis together with both Aphrodite and Persephone, but with a hint at the love goddess's successful takeover of Adonis. But let's see in more detail what is depicted here. In the middle, we have a youthful male figure sitting on elevated ground. His body faces right, but he turns his head to the left. He has a band tied around his head and a cloak kind of enveloping his lower body, but his upper body is naked. He holds a stick in his right hand and plays a kithara with his left. And there is a deer crouching on the ground in front of him. On the right, in front of the youth, stands a female figure wearing a sleeveless belted dress, a cloak, headband, and plenty of jewelry. In her right hand, she holds a crossbar torch, and in her left, a bowl or a pomegranate with a small ribbon. We can't tell for sure, a round object, probably with a small projection implying a pomegranate. A fillet hangs from her right forearm, and a tall, narrow rock stands at her side. This is supposed to represent rock. On the left stands a female figure, similarly dressed and bejeweled, but with no cloak. Her left foot is raised on an elevated ground line, and she bends forward to offer an alabastron. This is a type of vessel that I'll come back to. So she's offering him this vessel. She may be holding a small curved object in her left hand, there, but it is hard to tell, and I have no idea what this may be. Flanking the trio are two identical, effeminate, quite androgynous Eros figures, depicted as if about to fly away but turning to look back towards the central scene. The one on the left holds a bucket and a chain of rosettes, the other holds two fillets and a wreath. The absence of inscriptions does not allow us to identify the figures with certainty, but several elements can assist us. Kambitoglu's identification of the youth as Adonis seems persuasive. The kithara or lyre, an attribute of educated and beautiful young men, is especially related to Adonis, his father Kineras of Cyprus being associated with music, and he is often shown playing it, Adonis. The figure on the right must be Persephone, as shown by one of her characteristic attributes, the cross bar torch, and by the pomegranate, if indeed this is what the round object is. As for the female figure on the left, Kambitoglu chose to leave her as anonymous, although he tentatively identified her as a nymph because nymphs mourn Adonis's death. He also associated the figure with the underworld, quote, since the underworld demon Ascalaphus was the son of the nymph of the river Styx, Orphne, and the river Acheron, and was in Hades' garden when Persephone ate the pomegranate seed, binding her to Hades. But I find this far-fetched. In my view, several features support the identification of the woman offering the alabastron with the goddess Aphrodite. First, the appearance and stance of the woman on the left suggests a figure equal in status to Persephone rather than a secondary figure, such as a nymph. She is of the same or even of slightly larger stature as Persephone, if she, stood up, and like her is elegantly dressed, coiffed, and bejeweled. The only difference is her lack of a cloak, but this is not important because Aphrodite is often scantily dressed, if at all. The object she offers Adonis, the vase, the alabastron, draws his attention away from his kithara playing and from Persephone standing in front of him. This brings Aphrodite and Adonis closer, exchanging glances, and draws the viewer's attention to the left, away from Persephone. Thus, the otherwise symmetrical composition favors the left side to emphasize the connection of the lovers, foreshadowing their reunion. A similar depiction of Aphrodite drawing Adonis's attention away from Persephone is likely represented on this vase in Sydney, where Adonis, again holding a stick, stands between two women. Aphrodite stands on the left in a relaxed pose, using the wry neck perched on her finger to draw the gaze of Adonis away from the heavily cloaked Persephone, who stands on the right, holding a mirror. Maybe she says, mirror, mirror, who is the most beautiful? But it didn't work. We will see later that the function of the desire-inducing bird and the perfume contained in the alabastron would be comparable. Of interest is also a parallel scene provided on another similar dish with our dish, we see here. This is a slightly later workshop product of the same group of the White Sackos painter workshop. And here we have a more simplified composition with three figures. In the center we have a woman holding a bowl and a casket, sitting on a tall rock outcrop. Her body faces right, but she turns her head back, like Adonis in the previous dish, to face another woman on the left. This figure, with left foot on a shorter rock, bends forward to offer an alabastron to the seated woman. The poses of these two figures are almost exact copies of the Naples scene, not surprising for a product of the same workshop. That this painter was certainly influenced in his composition by the Naples depiction is confirmed through the inclusion of an animated pan or satyr-like figure holding a lit torch over the women and a shepherd's crook. He is quite similar to the figure on the upper section of the dish, in front of the Amazon chariot. The Boston, this one, dish is more clumsily painted and depicts a generalized scene, though the exposed breast of the seated woman, an unusual motif in South Italian vase painting, may still refer to the Aphrodisian realm, but we don't know who these figures are. A further clue as to the identity of the female on our dish, her identity as Aphrodite, is the alabastron she holds. This is a special vessel, and these are two real ones, used to contain perfumed oil. It appears in girls' toilet and courtship scenes, as we can see here, and was also a common wedding gift. On South Italian vases, Eros often holds an alabastron, or even pours its contents over the head of a young man or woman, conferring on them a tempting erotic scent, probably myrrh, since we know this perfume was used for brides and bridegrooms. The alabastron also had a funerary use. perfumed oil was used by women to anoint the corpse and the grave. On many Attic lithoi, this type of vessel, which are funerary, this vessel, the alabastron, appears frequently among the offerings being brought to the grave by women. Similarly, on this Apulian vase, it can be seen among other grave offerings, having already brought to the dead. The alabastron, however, was primarily associated with seduction, and thus with Eros, Aphrodite, and her followers. On this early 5th century terracotta plaque from Locri, South Italy again, it is carried by one of the goddess's winged companions, and it's Aphrodite with Hermes on a chariot. Oh, sorry. And there are other depictions also showing, in relation to Aphrodite. And on a Tarentine bottle, Aphrodite's head is flanked by two of her symbols, a swan on the left and an alabastron on the right. The alabastron and its perfume contents, of course, are linked also with the figure of Adonis through both erotic and funerary associations. This connection is reflected in ritual practices in his honor, as indicated by the poet Theocritus' Idyll 15, where Queen Arsinoe of Egypt in Hellenistic times placed golden alabastra with Syrian perfume, as the poem says, next to the image of Adonis during the festival in his honor. It is also indicated by a terracotta figurine representing a young woman pouring presumably perfume from an alabastron into a so-called Garden of Adonis. These Garden of Adonis are well known in the cult of, during the festival. Women sowed quick sprouting seeds on broken vases, and this is an upside turned broken pot that they put some soil and seeds that grew very quickly, and they were used in the festival for Adonis. So in this very interesting terracotta figurine, we have this peculiar pouring, we can assume it is perfume, onto these plants or fruits, whatever they are contained into this. So it's kind of a ritual of some sort, connecting the perfume with Adonis cult, with the cult of Adonis. By referring to one of the standard implements of Aphrodite, the alabastron, a poet, Callimachus, in his hymn to the goddess Athena, shows how much the virgin goddess was averse to employing the seductive tools of Aphrodite. Athena's followers in this poem are commanded to leave their unguents and accompanying alabastra at home because they are of no use to the chaste goddess. So it shows even more how intimately associated are with seduction and the world of the love goddess. Athena bans all of this. The seductive nature of the alabastron and its aromatic contents is also shown in the myth involving the boatman Faun. Aphrodite, again another of these men associated with Aphrodite. Aphrodite, as a reward for his random act of kindness to her, he was a boatman and offered to ferry her across for free, while Aphrodite was disguised as an old and ugly woman. For his kindness, she gives the old and ugly boatman Faun an alabastron of perfumed oil that restored his youth and turned him to the most handsome and irresistible of men. The similarity in shape and size of the alabastron to a dildo and an erect penis was exploited by Aristophanes in a seduction scene of Lysistrata. When Myrine, a woman, offered her sexually frustrated husband, Kinesias, an alabastron with perfumed oil, he refused to accept it because he said he already had his own, implying his erection. Incidentally, Myrini's name is a diminutive of Myrrha, little myrrh, and would have referred to the perfume contained in the alabastron, myrrh. Thus, by offering her husband a vial of myrrh, Myrini offers him a sexual substitute of herself. And I'm sure you know the Lysistrata plot is all about women not offering sex to men, to their husbands. I suggest, therefore, that the alabastron is placed in the hands of the woman on the Naples dish, not only to identify her as Aphrodite, but also to intensify the erotic, sensual atmosphere and potentially refer to erotic magic, a kind of visual spell that draws Adonis to her, like the Rhine and the Inks will. This vessel is also well suited to the intended recipient, who from his birth is associated with the world of perfumes, particularly myrrh. Now, the deer present in the scene, which could simply refer to the loveliness of Adonis or imply he's a hunter, is also part of the circle of Aphrodite. Here, Eros rides 2 deer, and in this figurine he plays with one, and a deer appears next to a seated Aphrodite on this box lid. So the deer could again fit within the Aphrodisian world. I come now to the 2 Eros figures, flanking the central trio and balancing the composition on the dish. Kambitoglou argued that Adonis is here represented in the company of Persephone, supporting this by associating the Eros figures with the underworld on the basis of their presence in an anodos scene of Aphrodite. But rather than referring to the underworld, Erotes in anodos scenes make more sense as welcoming the figure to life, as we can see on this vase that we saw earlier, where Adonis comes up in the underworld and we see Eros figures above welcoming him in this world. I believe that as on this Lutrophoros, where we have identical Eros figures on either side above each of the goddesses, our Eros figures are better interpreted as indicating that Adonis is the object of desire of both divine rivals. I would conclude, therefore, that the scene on the Naples dish represents Aphrodite in the process of claiming Adonis back from Persephone, rather than Adonis shown in intimate association with Persephone alone, as Kambitoglou believes. Kambitoglou's reading implies Adonis is essentially dead if he is with Persephone only, and this would project a rather gloomy message. My interpretation makes more sense in view of the overall message projected, namely the power of love and an implicit hope for mortal rebirth into an afterlife. This fits with South Italian artists' preoccupation with a life hereafter. Some mythological characters, like Heracles, Theseus, and Orpheus, risked descending to Hades once. In contrast, Adonis traveled there regularly, back and forth. But he also regularly ascended from death, from Hades. So he dies and is born again. And this happens because of the love of heavenly Aphrodite. The close association between love and death has been expressed repeatedly in Greek literature, and images of marriage are often found on funerary monuments, highlighting the close connection between marriage and death. Thus, a scene representing Adonis being seduced away from Persephone and into the arms of Aphrodite bears an eschatological message for the defeat of death. In a funerary context, the use of such a dish, decorated with a myth that mitigated the absolute opposition between life and death, would have carried a message of mitigating the finality of death through the power of love. One final point. Kambitoglou saw a connection between the Amazon depicted in the top section of the dish and the Adonis scene at the bottom. He argued the Amazon is there because on Apulian vases, Amazons are connected with the underworld. Because his argument is that at the bottom we have Adonis in the underworld with Persephone. So he assumes that the Amazon is there because she's connected with the underworld. And he argued this is shown by Amazon heads appearing frequently on South Italian vases, which are mostly used as tomb offerings, and also shown by Amazons in a floral surround which suggests rising from the underworld. These arguments are not very persuasive to me, and even less so because no literary sources make such an association between Amazons and the underworld. Our painter, the White Sakos painter, in general was fond of Amazons driving chariots. He depicted them frequently. He also had a predilection for divine female drivers, such as Nike, Artemis, and Athena. And we see here a similar dish with Athena driving the chariot. Of course, there's nothing to do with the underworld here. And decorating a dish used mostly by women with two scenes dominated by female figures would have been quite appropriate. We have a similar combination of Amazons, this time in battle. Sorry, the picture is a bit fuzzy, but on the neck we see Amazons fighting, and in the body we have another scene of the contest for Adonis. So we have again this combination of Amazons with the dispute for Adonis on this crater. If any thematic connection between the two halves of our dish and of this crater was intended by the painters, I would suggest it was the eastern origins of both Adonis and the Amazons. Indeed, Adonis is sometimes shown on Apulian vases with the same Phrygian style of hat as the Amazons wear, emphasizing his eastern background. I could also tentatively suggest another connection based on evidence reported by the author Strabo. In his discussion of the Amazon queen Myrina, who gave her name to a city in Asia Minor, Myrina, and while discussing her burial mound mentioned in the Iliad, Strabo refers to her as an accomplished charioteer. Myrina's name is reminiscent of Myrine, a diminutive of Mira, Adonis's mother. Perhaps then it was this specific Amazon that our painter had in mind as a famous charioteer when deciding what to depict in the Tondo above a scene taken from the myth of Adonis. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that exceptionally well-crafted argument. It was a pleasure to sit and listen to you present it. I know Dr. Salapata is more than welcome and open to questions. So, any questions from any members of the audience?
Can I ask something?
Yes, please.
About Myrina. You said it's a city in Asia Minor.
More or less. Where that figurine of the woman pouring the perfume into, where it came from.
Myrina is also in Limnos, right?
There are several.
So it's the same name?
Probably. Yes, there are other Myrina cities. Yeah.
Also other cities?
Yeah. Because it's not far from Lesbos. No. There are other.
Any further questions?
Stavrolenos.
Sorry?
Stavrolenos.
Stravolemis.
Lenis.
Yeah.
You said that you had more to say about if you were interested.
Yeah, it is quite interesting actually. So we know from references of different authors that it starts with mythology again. There was a nymph, Inks, that was her name, who she, using something with her magical kind of craft. She made Zeus fall in love with Io, the one who was transformed into a cow. Yeah. So Hera was irritated. I mean, the usual, with the Zeus and his infidelities and all this. And she was transformed into this bird, which was used. We know from authors. It was given to Jason to attract the Medea. It's very complicated. Medea, on the other hand, was a witch herself. So it's kind of, there was a lot of magic happening there. And the way it's interesting, we know how they used it. They tied somehow the bird into a wheel and they turned it around. And that way they would attract, the lover or something. This, I think, it's kind of animal ethics at the end. They probably stopped using the bird tied on the wheel and they used just the wheel tied with a string, so kind of like there is a game. There's a, how do we call it? Does it have a name? I can't remember. Where you make that noise. Sorry? Yeah. It's like, exactly. It makes a noise. Yeah. So that's what Eros holding this instrument was doing. But so through the turning of the wheel, whether it has a bird on it or not, they kind of, supposedly they said magic spells and they attracted the lover, the one they wanted. But the bird itself also has this magic. I don't know if they used it separately as well, but we see it present in several scenes. So both, and that's why they have the same name. It's Inks, the name of the bird, and Inks Will, the one that they use. So both of them were used in erotic magic one way or another to attract lovers. So Aphrodite, of course, is the one, inducing, all these feelings, I guess.
I have a question. I take your point about the that particular image that you have on the screen there, and that you don't want it to be related to the underworld, the upper part. But,
yes.
But what do you think is like the white horses then? I mean, white usually isn't that usually related to the underworld?
I think the previous one. Oh, sorry. Athena has also two of them at least. It's black and white, but two of them are white. So I don't think it's any.
So it has no connection. Yeah.
Not particularly. Why did you say that?
No, because sometimes like with, especially with Lekythoi, when you have like the white.
The figures, like, the humans rather than.
Yes, it's a sign of death.
Yes.
It's morbid.
Yeah,
so
but
I
don't think with the horses, because I can think of other things that even show the battle of gods and giants, and Poseidon is on a white horse. So I don't think this means anything related to the underworld. It's quite striking, the eye goes to the white, which is actually, makes it more visible, the top than the bottom. It could be, this one could be in the underworld.
Yes.
But I don't think the other has any underworld.
Can I ask, do you have any thoughts on what Adonis may be holding other than the kithara? Like that sort of, on his staff?
I don't know I don't think this is at the top of the staff. I think this is hanging because there are several things. Yeah, no, I don't think it's
related, not related
not
to
that. There is a gap. But Adonis holds a stick in other scenes as well for some reason. I really don't know why. It's a bit of a, if it is, I mean, we assume it is, but I don't know why. It's not to play with that.
No.
It's nothing to do with that.
No, actually, when you mentioned what Aphrodite might be holding in her lower left hand,
yes.
When I looked at it, I thought it might be a plectrum, but then I see that the Eros behind her also holds something very similar above the garland of flowers that he holds.
Which, this one?
No, no,
Oh.
down to the left, to the left.
This
Yeah,
one?
yeah,
Right.
Here,
yeah. He's got something very similar in his hand above that series of rosettes.
there.
No, yes.
I think that this is just a string. Actually, I have looked up, I have enlarged and looked quite carefully. But now what I think, here's a larger one. Yeah, it's not, right, I see.
It looks very similar, but
Oh, that's true.
I don't think the painter was having our concerns in mind
No.
when he actually painted that, unfortunately for us.
But it's true, this is very fun. What I suspect, what is that? Sorry, I should have gone. I suspect. What is, if it is something,
Uh-huh.
it could be a handle from something that he didn't bother.
Execute.
Yeah, yes, it
Yeah.
could be something that it was a routine that they hold something,
Yeah.
but it does look like a handle that the arrows. You're right. Thank you. Yeah, that's quite.
Yes, Chicago.
Go back to this.
Explain about Amazon. Amazon in Italian, South Italian. I cannot understand Amazon and
The
It's
Amazon.
Orient, yes.
The Orient.
So
And
why
yeah, and Amazons were. Yeah, Amazon. They are both from the east, and I think that's the only way we can connect them. Otherwise, they don't have any particular connection, the two of them. But because both have these Oriental features, the hat. Other than that, I don't see any other, except that they are exotic creatures from the east, because Adonis never lost his Oriental kind of origins, and they always assume that he came from the east. And the Amazons, yes, they are known to be from the east, but the Amazons are like enemies on one hand of the Greeks. Adonis was not an enemy, so there isn't any. I don't really know. I don't even know if there is any relation.
real Amazon?
Yeah.
And identified by character.
Sorry, I didn't.
Professor kindly to be identified this Amazon.
I can't.
Professor Camilo do identify the figure as an Amazon.
Oh no, that's clear. We know that. Yeah, we know that it is Amazon. Yeah, because she has the shield and she has a battle axe. Yeah, no, this is clear. There's no dispute. The problem is why. If there is a connection, there may not be a connection. They may be totally unrelated. Let's paint an Amazon here and let's paint. We don't really know. But we have to, try to see. Could there be any connection? They're both feminine. Amazons, of course, women. This is, two ladies who are claiming a man, which is quite exceptional. They have the upper hand here, and it's a feminine scene. And as I said, this kind of dishes were used, we assume, by women for weddings, for washing, ritual washing in weddings, funerals. So it makes sense to be a feminine subject. So here are the Amazons. And here is the scene related to the female world of love, but also death. It can be used in both situations of weddings and funerals. And possibly this is more related to a funeral, I guess. But we don't know if there is a connection.
So Professor Camilo
Yeah.
interpretation
Yeah.
in publication.
Yes, it is. Yeah, but he was concerned. He also dealt with this, which he identified as Adonis and Persephone only. He left this lady kind of uncertain.
Philippa.
Yeah.
No, I was just wondering,
the two figures which are sort of juxtapositions at the top and the bottom. One is falling and one is upright. You know, on the second ring.
The arrows figure. Yeah.
They're the arrows. Is there symbolism there?
That's actually a good point, because it can be used only from this side. We cannot, if we turn it around to see this one, everything would be upside down, so it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, why this is shown that way rather than...
I was wondering if the bottom is falling into Hades or the underworld.
Could be. That's something for me to think about, actually. Yes, because it's not a matter of course, again, the painter may have painted this first, and just, you turn it around and you paint the figures, of course.
It could be a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. We don't know how. I mean, they make mistakes. Painters do make mistakes. So if he started with this band, he could have decorated with the tendrils and the others, and of course painted the arrows there and the other arrows. And then when he decided what to paint in the interior, he centered it, the two arrows figures above and below, but he had already done it. But that could be one, we can say, oh, it just happened there. But it could be on purpose and showing the cyclical kind of, the cycle of death and rebirth. So that's very useful too.
Could it be that there's more than one person involved in painting it? So one person's painting the rim,
definitely. Yes, exactly. Yes, that's also very common. Yes, exactly. Someone big. Yeah, because
actually balances it.
Yes, yeah, because this could be done by an assistant. It doesn't need a master to do. So yes, that could also be an option of not particularly related, but it could be related, which is that's useful. Thanks.
Well, I think at this stage we'll thank our speaker once more, but I'll invite you to a glass of wine, and I'm sure you'll be able to engage in further conversation.